Good morning, folks, and welcome to Mustang Family Insights Disability Resource Center session. Mustang Family Insights is hosted by Parent and Family Programs and is a resource webinar series for Cal Poly parents and supporters featuring campus and community experts. My name is Kanani Makikau, she, hers. I am the Assistant Director for Parent and Family Programs, and I will be your host today. Also joining me from the Parent and Family Programs team is Lead Coordinator Stanley Learn. Some housekeeping items I want to take care of before we start. The QA function is enabled, and you can find that button located at the bottom of your screen. You are encouraged to type questions during the presentation, which we will get to after the presentation is over. Additionally, as you saw, this webinar is being recorded today, and we're going to put this on the Parent and Family Programs website. We will post the link at the end of the session, and if you get a chance, I highly recommend taking a look at the many resource webinars that we have done in the past. They can be a really great resource that you can enjoy from the comfort of your computer. So today, the Parent and Family Programs team is excited to have our valued colleagues and Disability Resource Center campus experts, Jen Donaldson and Carrie Perez, as our guest presenters. Jen began her role as the director for the DRC, Disability Resource Center, in fall of 2022. Prior to her joining Cal Poly, she has worked for almost 20 years in higher education disability services. Carrie Perez is an access specialist and outreach coordinator at Cal Poly Disability Resource Center since May of 2023. And although Carrie is new to Cal Poly, Carrie has been working in higher education with students for the past 20 years. So we got a lot of experience in the room here, folks. So thank you for being here today. Jen and Carrie, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you very much. As Kanani said, I am Jen Donaldson. I am the director for the DRC and have been with Cal Poly for about a year now and very excited to be here. And thank you for joining us today. So we are the DRC, the Disability Resource Center. We are located over in the Student Services Building, room 124, which is across from Spanos Stadium. Within our department, we have a variety of support staff that help students through. So we do have 7 access specialists. An access specialist role is to be able to support students in developing their accommodation plans and helping manage and advocate for students with disabilities. We also have a services coordinator that assists with the office. We have 2 testing services coordinators, as well as an assistive technology specialist. We'll go a little bit more into what that all means. Within our building, we do have offices, spaces to meet with the access specialists, as well as we have a new, what we call the Serenity Room, that is a great space for students to be able to go and relax, reset. It has some massage chairs. It has some nice calming different essentials for calming and kind of relieving any maybe stress or anxiety they might be experiencing, as well as a new study space. So if students within the DRC are looking for a space to go and have a quiet space to study, they can also utilize our study space in the DRC.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Perez, and I am one of the access specialists, as Kanani had nicely introduced me. I'm excited to be a part of the Cal Poly community and work directly with students to provide accommodations both on campus and in the classroom. So one of the things that we do, our main role is to help assist students in making sure that we meet with them regarding their disability and making sure that we address access. So if there's any barriers that come up due to a disability, we will help with the student to provide an accommodation plan to address those barriers. Just some examples of disabilities that we come in contact with students range from psychological learning disabilities, physical health, chronic illness, mobility, blindness and low vision, deaf and hard in hearing, and then also temporary disabilities if a student gets injured and needs assistance within the range of like an injury or not necessarily like an illness, like a common cold, but more extreme. In addition to building a plan with a student, we also assist student in advocacy. So if a student is running into some issues with communication with their instructor or needs a little bit more support in that area, we'd be happy to help assist the student in that way. Majority of our students don't have any issues with their faculty members following along with their accommodations, but if there is a situation where a student feels like they need a little more support in that area, we can absolutely step in. We also assist students, and we, as Jen had mentioned, house our DRC testing accommodations at the testing center. So a student can come in, do a makeup exam, take care of their testing accommodations, whether they have time and a half or a distraction reduced environment. They would do that within the DRC testing center. Or they could make arrangements directly with their instructor. So we really allow the students to make that decision on the best for them as far as that testing environment.
Some other support services, alternate media. And so if maybe a student has accommodations to receive their books via e-text so that maybe they can auditorily hear them, or we prepare them in Braille, we do provide the alt media services. We also have, as I mentioned, assistive technology specialists. And so that is John, who's in the picture there. He is there to consult and provide training around a variety of different assistive technologies. We do have tech loans. So some examples might include a license for Otter or Glean, which are note-taking technologies. We also have what we call smart pens. And those are pens that a student might take notes. It also audio records them as well as visually records them. So different types of technology we have that students can check out within our department. And we've got this really great, we'll do workshops and a website called Getting Good Grades with Gadgets that really goes over a variety of different technologies that we use every day that we may not be familiar with, different ways that they can work to support students in different ways. So we offer ongoing workshops and consultations with John around those. We also offer transportation services, and this is door-to-door transportation. And so if students for might be a temporary disability, a broken leg, or it might be for somebody with mobility, or it might be somebody with health conditions that may need that door-to-door support. So we do have 2 golf carts, as well as 2 wheelchair accessible vans. And we have about 68 stops around campus. And they go from classroom to classroom, they go to variety buildings all over campus, they go up to housing. And so if students need rides to their classes, or maybe to the library or anywhere on campus from their housing, they would first meet with their access specialist, qualify for an accommodation for using the tram services, and then they'd be able to use the tram services daily. We provide the services Monday through Friday, from 6:45 a.m. until 8:30 p.m.
So a student requesting services, it's a little different than K through 12. The student identifies, so the student would complete a online application. It's a fairly easy, quick process. If a student has any problems with that, filling out the application, we can absolutely help support the student in that way. Another piece to the application would be the documentation. So we're looking for the diagnosis or the disability information, along with any information to help identify the limitations that the student has, so that we can put together a comprehensive and reasonable plan for the student. Once we receive the documentation and the application, we reach out to the student to line up what is a student intake. And the student intake is probably our most valuable source of information because it's the student's account of how their disability and their history for them and their experience. And we can talk about that in the intake and really put together a plan that is specific to them. We really want to make sure that with providing accommodations that it's individualized. And then once the intake is complete and we have a plan in place, then from there the student receives their accommodations. We walk the student through their portal too, and this is where the student will send out their letters, will arrange for their testing. So it's all within that portal and very easy for the student to take ownership of their accommodations and really puts them in the driver's seat on how they want their accommodations implemented. Also, the student has access to us with DMC meetings, so they can meet with us if for some reason they notice that in the classroom there is a barrier that arises. We will absolutely meet with them to talk about if we have to add accommodations or make adjustments. We realize that accommodations can be ever changing, and especially with a new student, they may not know what they need until they're in the classroom. So we absolutely, that's not the accommodation can be looked at and we can make some adjustments if needed.
And Carrie, can I note as well that regarding the documentation, if a student comes in and maybe they don't have documentation yet, maybe for the first time they're starting to experience maybe some anxiety, or maybe they're thinking like, wow, maybe I do have this disability, but I've never been diagnosed. They can come to us and we can provide referrals of where they can get maybe those diagnoses. And at times when talking through them until they're able to access the documentation, we're willing to work with them around temporary accommodations. So please feel free to send your student to us if there may be a need for referrals.
Yeah, thank you for expanding on that, Jen. That's really important. We will absolutely work with the student if they're maybe don't have their documentation and it's just the time in the quarter, because we recognize that accommodations aren't retroactive. So we definitely want to provide the support, and if they can get their documentation to us in a timely manner, then that would be wonderful. So yeah, we wouldn't want the student not to seek out services just because of the documentation. And then here's a chart for sort of the side-by-side comparison of K through 12 versus in higher education. There are some differences. The type of law that higher education follows is the ADA, along with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So how that looks on campus is then the student, instead of K through 12 identifying the student, in higher education, it is the responsibility of the student to step forward and disclose. Now, when they disclose, they're disclosing to us, and that information is protected. It's confidential. But we don't seek out students and say, oh, you need to, line up accommodations. It is solely the student that is the driving force behind that. Advocacy too, we also recognize that just because a student turns 18, they're not all of a sudden this wonderful advocate. We work with students on that process. We always want to make sure that we are allowing the student some agency. So we want to support them on, okay, well, so you need to talk to your instructor. Here's some templates that you might use in that communication, or maybe you want to CC me on the email. So we like to still have them be the person that's the driving force behind the advocacy, but we're alongside them. We're sort of in the driver's seat if they would like that. And then whereas K through 12, this is a big difference. The IEP, we'll use that as an example, is to provide success in the classroom. At high school, or higher education level, it's about access. It's about equity. So those accommodations are about addressing barriers and making sure that we are either eliminating them or mitigating them. And then finally, with accommodations, they have in higher education, they have to meet certain criteria, one of them being reasonable. They cannot compete against course objectives. It's sometimes it takes a little, if we notice that a student is asking for a particular accommodation that might be challenging the objectives in the classroom, we're going to have a dialogue with the faculty member. It's going to be a collaborative effort to see, well, okay, so this isn't working. What are other ways that are reasonable that don't compete, but maybe still support the student? So it's a little bit more dynamic in higher education.
And I would note too, another big change is that when students maybe use an IEP or 504 in high school, that is given to the each teacher. And with that, it also discloses what the student's disability is. Once they come to the post-secondary level, that is their story to tell or not tell. So we do not disclose what the disability is. What the faculty receive is simply a notification letter that says the student qualifies for accommodations and here are the accommodations they qualify. So no longer does it disclose or share out what the actual disability is. I often get from parents as well, my child wants to try it first without accommodations. And so what I always suggest is get the accommodations in place. You don't have to use them, but if you fall down, they're already in place and it's easy to send that letter to your instructor when it's already all in place versus having to go get your documentation, apply for services, and then meeting with a specialist. And so when students are in the post-secondary, they're really choosing which classes they want to use which accommodations in. It's up to them to decide. And so maybe they have an accommodation plan and they choose not to use them at that time, and that's okay. But I always suggest just get registered with us, have it in place, so that if you do need them, it's very easy the next day to be able to access them and start those accommodations. Accommodation letters can go out at any time during a quarter. It does not have to be at the beginning. It can be at any point. And like Carrie mentioned before, it's fluid. It might be a fluid document where maybe some of those accommodations might shift or change. You don't know what you don't know until you're in the classroom at the college level for the first time and going, oh, this is very different. And so the access specialist in our entire team is there to be able to support students through those transitions. And I think one piece that we don't have on the slide, it's a big transition for family supporters, parents, because there is that piece where we are really working with a student for the advocacy. We also can't share any information with anyone without the student's written permission for us to share any information. There is a FERPA release form, but we also have a release of information within the DRC specifically that will allow us or not allow us to share any information with anybody without their written permission. And oftentimes when we have families call and share information with us, we always want families to be part of this, but we're also going to say, let's include the student. We want the student to be part of this conversation as well. So it's a big shift and transition for both the student and the supporters. We know it's a difficult transition, and we're there to support, the parents, supporters, and the students through it. So please feel free to reach out, but there might be some of those barriers of what we can share or not share out. So any questions for us? Those are kind of the basics around the DRC, and it's also individualized based on the student and the student needs. And so we're open to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Carrie. Jen, do you want to stop sharing screen?
Yes.
All right, great.
And let me real quick, in case anybody wants to write down our contact information, you're always welcome to call us or email us at drc@calpoly.edu.
And we will go ahead and post that information in the chat as well, folks, so that you have that. Thank you, Jen and Carrie, for presenting such great and useful information. I'm always impressed with the amount of resources available to our students. And one of the reasons I enjoy hosting these webinars is because I also get to learn something new when people ask questions. And so we do have some questions in the QA box from attendees. Jen and Carrie, are you ready to answer some questions?
We're ready.
Okay. The first one I see here is, in high school, my student was allotted extra time to take tests. Can you talk more about the testing services at Cal Poly?
So yes, once students meet with their access specialist, their accommodations will be determined, and that might include extended testing time. So students then have the ability to either test within a distraction-reduced environment. So we do have testing center within the DRC. Students can request to take each test with us, or maybe certain tests with us. It just depends on what the student would like to do. If the student would like to take the test with the professor still in the class, they can talk with the professor, and if it works out where maybe there's not another class coming in right away, or the professor can stay for that extended time, that they can take the course within the class. We do work to mirror the experience in the classroom. So let's say if a student is taking a test with us in the DRC testing space, whether maybe their additional time, or they might have a quieter space, a variety of different type of accommodations and testing, they will have access to the professor, ask questions just as they would in the classroom. And so we work with them around that. We work with the professors to look how do we identify, how do we reach you so that they have the same access.
Thanks. So when a student wants some extra time for testing, like this parent was asking, is it the same process of application? Do they need to fill it out and go through an intake?
Yes, correct. So that would be part of their accommodation plan. What happens is when they fill out the application online, provide documentation, or if they need referrals to let us know. During the intake process, what I kind of say is based on the interactive process with the student and that communication, hearing about the student's story and how does their disability impact them, as well as the documentation, we'll develop what we call the accommodation plan. And that might be a kind of bucket, I say, of accommodations that the student can choose and qualifies to use. And then they get to choose which one. So testing accommodations might be under that as well, if that's something that they're needing to have. And it might be, there's a variety of other testing accommodations that might include assistive technology. It might include a quiet space. It might include white noise machine. It might include music. A variety just based on the students and the access specialist interactive process to determine what that looks like. But that would all be completed through the intake process. So completing the application would be the first step.
Okay, great. Thanks for that information there. Next question I have here is, my son broke his leg and will still be in a cast when school starts. How can he get accommodations for temporary disability starting day one?
He'd be working with me. So he needs to start first with filling out an application, and then uploading any documentation related to the injury, and then just an idea of the duration of need. So does that include physical therapy or anything like that, so that we're aware of not only the need, but the length of time. And then once I receive that application, I reach out to the student and we do like a brief intake. Those are typically fall within a certain type of accommodation. We have tram services, as Jen highlighted, where we can have the student submit their schedule. And so the tram service then connects with them to pick them up and bring them either to their dormitory in the classroom or wherever they need to be on campus. And then I would also, during that intake, I want to know a little bit more too about is there any barriers in the classroom due to the injury, or is there anything else that I need to be aware of as far as a barrier related to the injury that we need to look at as far as lining up accommodations. I'm going to also ask about housing. I'm going to want to know, which building they're in. Do they have access to an elevator or on the first floor, make sure that they're not on a top bunk. Or so these are sort of the things that I'll go over during the intake to make sure that we got all the areas covered, to make sure that the student doesn't re-injure themselves or, has a safe time on campus.
All right, great. So it sounds like accommodations can happen day one. They just first need to get to that application and start that intake process. Okay. And you still have some, yes, you still have time, folks, because September 21st. So you have some time to fill out that application to the parent who asked that question. I have another question here, and it also has to do with accommodations. It sounds like I'll try and synthesize this question a little bit. They're asking about the deadlines for requesting accommodations, and what if deadlines aren't met? Do they not get anything for the entire year?
So there's no deadlines. You can request accommodations at any point. Accommodations are not retroactive, so meaning that they wouldn't go back before the accommodations were in place, but they will be for moving forward. And so we have students register with us all year round. And so it can be really at any point, any student can fill an application and request services with us. The only part is not retroactive. So the quicker they can do it, the better, just for them, so that it's set up in advance. But like I said, there's oftentimes who students want to start it first, give it a try and see. And then sometimes the second quarter, they'll come in and say, oh, maybe I do want to kind of start using some of those accommodations. So at any point, a student can request accommodations with us.
Got it. So rolling applications,
Yep.
No deadlines on. Okay, great. I have one more question here in the QA box, and it says, I know you covered some of this, but can I contact the DRC directly to ask you how my student is doing?
Can we take that?
Cover this?
Go for it.
So again, we're really about making sure that the student is becoming a self-advocate, right? This is a learning process. So we want to make sure that the student is involved. We don't want to sideline the student. The student really is our focus. Certainly that doesn't mean that we wouldn't parent or connect with a parent or collaborate with a parent. But we really want to focus on the student reaching out, the student being the driving force behind their accommodations. Now, obviously, if there was an emergency, or that type of thing, we would definitely reach out to a parent. But for the most part, with the student being an adult now, we want to really make sure that they're learning how to advocate for themselves and really being in charge and having agency. So that's really our goal. Did you want to expand on that, John? Or?
Yeah, I would say also we also can't share information without a release of information sign that we can share anything out. Though I will say that a lot of times I do have parents call and want to just share information with me. So maybe I'm aware of some things that are going on, so then I can reach out to the student and be able to support the student. So we are always open to parents, supporters contacting us, and maybe if they have a concern or they want to share some information with us, so we can reach out to the student, because the student may not feel comfortable quite yet reaching out to us and letting us know that they've got some barriers or some challenges going on. And so when we gather that information, we reach out to the student and ask them to make, appointment with us so we can work with them to support them. But for regular check-ins, we can work with the student around how can you, communicate that out with your supporters? How can you share this information with your supporters? Like I said, it's a transition for everybody involved. And it can be a very difficult transition how to navigate, especially, at first. So we're there to support and guide, and we're there that if there are concerns that you're hearing from home, to just let us know, and we're happy to reach out to the student as well. And, provide any resources for support on campus as well.
Great. This question comes up a lot during slow days too, I think, with campus health and well-being, and at parent and family programs, we also get this question when we do our session. And one of the things that we tell parents and supporters is that, one, we can't replace you. You will always be the main support system here. And we want to help your students. And so when parents and supporters run into barriers, we say, please contact parent and family programs, because we want to help you help your student help themselves. That's sort of our motto over here. So we are advocating for self-advocacy, but also want to recognize what an important part of this journey that parents and supporters are. So thanks so much. That totally aligns with what we talk about in Slow Days. Okay, so that is the end of the questions there in the Q&A. I want to close up here and I thank our presenters, Jen Donaldson and Carrie Perez, for taking the time to present for parents and supporters today. The Disability Resource Center contact information is going to be posted in the chat. I think it already is there. I also want to thank you, parents and supporters, for joining us today. The Mustang Insights webinar series is a great way to stay connected to campus and receive up-to-date information directly from campus experts. Stanley has also put all the contact information for parent and family programs in the chat, so contact us. Reach out to either of our departments, the DRC Disability Resource Center, Parent and Family Programs, with any questions in the future. I hope you have a great day, folks. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.